Hello, friends. Welcome back to another day of reading through the Bible in 2 years. Today's reading is going to cover Genesis chapters 23 and 24. You only have two chapters today. So, chapter 23 starts off with the death of Sarah. The beloved wife of Abraham is about to pass away. So, at this point, Abraham has been basically a nomad. He doesn't have a land, he doesn't own anything. And in fact, he doesn't even own any land in which to bury Sarah. And so that's where we we start off in chapter 23. So Ephron tries to give the land away to Abraham, but Abraham refuses because Abraham wants to purchase the land so it will be legally binding and deeded to him. So so we see where he's refused the land, but in verse 15, um, Ephron says, "My lord, hear me. A piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that between me and you? So bury your dead." So, very subtly and publicly, but yet publicly, he tells Abraham the purchase price, which Abraham promptly pays. This is the only land that Abraham will own at his death that will come later because he was looking forward to a greater inheritance, as Hebrews chapter 11 tells us. So then we move on to chapter 24, and we kind of transition from the focus on Abraham to the focus on Isaac. And so Abraham's servant is given a charge to go and find a wife for Isaac. And in verse 3, Abraham tells him not to get him a wife from the Canaanites. Why do you think that might be? Because at this point, yet again, the commandment not intermarry has not yet been given. Well, the reason for this is because Abraham did not want Isaac to be unequally yoked. The Canaanites were not worshippers of the one true God, which is the God of Abraham. And we'll see through our readings later in the unfolding of the Old Testament how forsaking this commandment of God doesn't end well for those that do it. So in verse 6, we see where Abraham tells the servant, do not take my servant back there. And then the answer to that is given us in verse 7. And it all comes back to the promise that's been given to Abraham. And you notice now that Abraham's not trusting in his own cleverness as he did before for the promise to be fulfilled, but he is fully trusting God to fulfill the promise to him. And so the servant is charged with traveling to Nahor, to the land that Abraham came from, and it's going to be about 450 miles or so north of where he currently is. And of course, he can't jump in a car and drive there, and he can't jump on an airplane and fly there. It's a walk or ride on various beasts of burden in order to get there. So then we move on to there, and we have the servant's prayer. The servant prays that the woman that is to be given to Isaac will water his camels also. Now, what's significant about that is that she's not obligated to provide for the animals. She would be obligated to provide for him as he is a stranger, but not for the animals. This will be a distinctive mark for the woman whom God has chosen for Isaac. And I love this. Notice what verse 15 tells us. As the servant is speaking, before he had finished speaking, Rebekah appears. And if we go back to and look at verse 15, us as the reader, we know that Rebekah is the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor. But the servant doesn't know. We see this in Scripture because it's been provided for us, but the servant doesn't know. The servant doesn't know until he asks her. And this leads the servant to do one thing. In verses 26 through 27, the servant bows low and worships the Lord, the God of Abraham. That's all he can do, is be driven to his knees. And then in verses 34 through 47, the servant retells the story of his travels and how Rebekah has fulfilled what he had asked of from the Lord. And then in verse 53, he pays the dowry price. Now, of course, dowries aren't anything that we pay now when we go to take a wife, but according to the Holman Bible Dictionary, the dowry price is the marriage present that ensured the new wife's financial security against the possibility her husband might forsake her or die. And I like what happens in verse 55 through 56. In verse 55, um, Laban, which is the brother, says, "Let the young woman stay with us a few days, or even 10." Well, as we'll find out later, Laban's 10 days might have ended up being 20 years. And alas, though, the servant requests that he be sent away immediately because he knows that it is God that has directed all of this. And then in verse 60, as as Rebekah is going to be sent away, they provide a blessing to Rebekah. And look at that blessing and compare it to the blessing that's been given to Abraham. And there's a lot of similarities between those. They have no idea that that is almost reiterating the promise that God has given to Abraham. And finally, we finish off today's reading with the marriage of Isaac and Rebekah. So just as God provided the substitute during the offering of Isaac, he provided the wife for Isaac as well. And through the journey of Abraham's servant, you see God's hand at work in everything that's going on. God placed the servant and Rebekah at exactly the right place and exactly the right time. What a mighty God we serve. God bless you and have a great day.